When should you use ignore differences?
Use it when a field is intentionally managed outside Git and would otherwise create noisy or misleading drift. It should not be used to hide real configuration problems.
What are managed fields managers, filters in ArgoCD diffing?
These filters ignore changes associated with specific Kubernetes field managers in managed fields. They are useful when controllers legitimately own parts of a resource, and you do not want ArgoCD to fight them.
What is compare options in ArgoCD?
Compare options tune how ArgoCD calculates diffs, including behaviors like ignoring extraneous resources in some cases. They help adapt drift detection to real-world controller behavior.
What is orphaned resources monitoring in ArgoCD?
Orphaned resources monitoring identifies resources in a namespace or project scope that are not managed by an expected application. It helps detect leftovers, manual changes, or accidental ownership gaps.
Why is orphaned resource monitoring useful?
It highlights resources that may have escaped GitOps control, which can create security, cost, or operational issues. In other words, ghost resources with real bills.
What are resource inclusions and exclusions in ArgoCD?
They define which resource kinds ArgoCD should consider globally or skip entirely. This is useful when some cluster resources should never be managed or even watched by ArgoCD.
How does ArgoCD detect shared resource conflicts?
ArgoCD tracks ownership of managed resources using labels or annotations and compares this ownership during sync. If multiple apps target the same resource, conflicts can be surfaced or blocked.
What does the skip reconcile annotation do?
The skip reconcile annotation tells ArgoCD to stop reconciling a specific application temporarily. It can be useful for maintenance windows or debugging, but it should be removed promptly to restore GitOps control.
What is operation termination in ArgoCD?
Operation termination stops an in-progress sync or other application operation. This is useful if a rollout is clearly wrong or stuck, and you want to halt further apply steps.
What happens if a sync fails midway?
ArgoCD marks the operation failed and leaves the cluster in whatever partially applied state resulted up to that point. Operators then inspect errors, fix the source or environment, and retry or roll back.
Does ArgoCD automatically roll back failed syncs?
Not by default in the same way some deployment tools do. ArgoCD focuses on reconciling Git state, so rollback is typically performed by reverting Git or syncing to an earlier revision.
What is an ArgoCD project source repos rule?
Source repos in a project defines which repositories applications in that project may use. This prevents teams from pointing trusted deployment flows at arbitrary repos.
What is an ArgoCD project destinations rule?
Destinations define which clusters and namespaces a project is allowed to deploy to. This is a key boundary for multi-tenant or regulated environments.
What is cluster resource whitelist in an ArgoCD project?
Cluster resource whitelist controls which cluster-scoped resource kinds a project may manage. It helps prevent teams from accidentally or intentionally changing high-impact cluster-wide resources.
What is namespace resource blacklist in an ArgoCD project?
Namespace resource blacklist blocks specified namespace-scoped resource kinds from being deployed by applications in a project. It is part of the project guardrail toolkit.
What are project roles in ArgoCD?
Project roles are scoped permission sets associated with a project. They can grant view, sync, update, or custom actions to specific users, groups, or automation tokens.
What are JWT tokens for ArgoCD project roles?
ArgoCD can mint JWT tokens tied to project roles for automation use cases. These tokens should be short-lived when possible and handled like any privileged credential.
How does local user management work in ArgoCD?
ArgoCD supports local user accounts configured in its settings, but many teams prefer SSO for centralized identity lifecycle management. Local accounts are best kept minimal and purpose-specific.
How does OIDC integration work in ArgoCD?
ArgoCD delegates authentication to an OIDC provider directly or through DEX. User identity claims are then mapped into ArgoCD RBAC policies for authorization.
What role does DEX play when using SSO with ArgoCD?
DEX acts as an authentication intermediary, especially when your identity system needs protocol translation or a simpler integration path. In some setups, ArgoCD can talk directly to OIDC without DEX.
How are groups mapped to permissions in ArgoCD?
Group claims from the identity provider are matched against RBAC policy rules in ArgoCD RBAC-CM. This lets teams manage membership upstream and keep authorization declarative.
What is policy CSV in ArgoCD RBAC?
Policy CSV contains Caspin-style RBAC rules that define what subjects can do on what resources. It is the heart of ArgoCD authorization logic.
Why does the default RBAC policy matter?
The default policy determines what access is granted when no explicit rule matches. A permissive default can create accidental broad access, so production setups usually keep it very restrictive.
What is least privilege in ArgoCD?
Least privilege means giving each person, team, or token only the minimal application, project, and cluster access they require. It limits blast radius and reduces the chance of one bad click becoming a great story later.
How do you secure repository credentials in ArgoCD?
Repository credentials should be stored in Kubernetes secrets, encrypted at rest, scoped narrowly, and rotated regularly. Prefer provider-native, short-lived credentials where possible, instead of long-lived shared secrets.
Why are SSH-known hosts important for ArgoCD Git access?
Known hosts verification protects against man-in-the-middle attacks when connecting to Git over SSH. Skipping host verification is convenient right up until it becomes a post-mortem bullet point.
How does ArgoCD trust private Git servers with custom CIs?
Custom CI bundles can be configured so ArgoCD trusts internal Git or Helm endpoints signed by private certificate authorities. Without this, TLS verification will fail during repository access.
What is GNU PG verification in ArgoCD?
ArgoCD can verify signed commits or tags using configured GNU PG public keys. This adds supply chain assurance that the source being deployed was authored or approved by trusted identities.
Why is signed source verification useful in GitOps?
Git is the source of truth, so proving the authenticity of commits and tags increases trust in the deployment flow. It helps defend against compromised repos, accounts, or unreviewed changes.
How does ArgoCD store external cluster credentials?
Cluster connection data is usually stored as secrets in the ArgoCD namespace. These secrets include IP server details, authentication info, and optional labels used by generators.
What permissions does ArgoCD need on managed clusters?
It needs enough Kubernetes RBAC to create, update, delete, and observe the resources it manages. The right level depends on whether ArgoCD is managing only namespaces for a team or whole clusters.
What is app in any namespace in ArgoCD?
App in any namespace allows application resources to exist outside the ArgoCD control namespace, while still being managed by the ArgoCD control plane. It can support stronger team autonomy with proper governance.
What are the risks of app in any namespace?
It increases the operational and security surface because more namespaces can define deployable applications. Strong project policies and RBAC become even more important.
How do webhooks help ArgoCD?
Webhooks notify ArgoCD immediately when repositories change, reducing the delay between a Git update and ArgoCD noticing it. Without webhooks, ArgoCD relies more heavily on periodic polling.
Why should Git webhooks use shared secrets?
Shared secrets let ArgoCD verify that incoming webhook requests actually came from the repository provider. This prevents unauthenticated third parties from spoofing refresh events.
What is the Git polling versus webhook trade-off in ArgoCD?
Polling is simpler and more resilient to webhook misconfiguration, but it introduces delay and unnecessary source checks. Webhooks are faster and more efficient, but they require correct network and secret setup.
What is the list generator and application set?
The list generator produces applications from an explicit list of parameter values. It is simple and predictable, making it ideal when the number of targets is known and relatively stable.
What is the cluster generator and application set?
The cluster generator creates applications from clusters registered in ArgoCD. It is commonly used for multi-cluster rollouts where the same app should exist in many destinations.
What is the Git directory generator and application set?
The Git directory generator creates applications based on matching directories in a repository. This is ideal for repo layouts where each folder represents one app or environment.
What is the Git file generator and application set?
The Git file generator reads structured files from a repository and uses their contents as generator parameters. This works well for metadata-driven environments and platform catalogs.
What is the matrix generator and application set?
The matrix generator combines the output of two other generators to create a Cartesian product of parameters. It is useful for building apps across many clusters and environments from reusable inputs.
What is the merge generator and application set?
The merge generator combines parameter sets from multiple generators based on matching keys. It is useful when one generator provides defaults and another provides environment-specific overrides.
What is the SCM provider generator and application set?
The SCM provider generator discovers repositories from providers such as GitHub or GitLab and creates applications from them. It is helpful for large organizations with repository conventions.
What is the pull request generator and application set?
The pull request generator creates ephemeral applications for open pull requests. It is commonly used for preview environments where each PR gets its own deployable namespace.
What is the plugin generator and application set?
The plugin generator allows external logic to provide generator output. It offers flexibility for custom inventory sources, but like other extensions, it should be treated carefully from a security perspective.
What is Go template in application set?
Go template enables Go template syntax in the application set template, allowing generated parameter values to be inserted dynamically. It is powerful, but complex templates can become difficult to debug.
What is template patch in application set?
Template patch lets you patch the generated application template with additional logic or fields. It helps avoid repeating near-identical templates across many application sets.
What is rolling sync in application set?
Rolling sync is a strategy that rolls generated application updates out in controlled batches rather than all at once. It reduces risk when one application set manages a large fleet.
When should you use application set instead of app of apps?
Use application set when applications can be generated from a repeatable pattern, such as clusters, directories, or repositories. App of apps is often better when the child applications are curated explicitly.
When should you use app of apps instead of application set?
App of apps is useful when you want a manually curated hierarchy with explicit child applications and independent configuration per child. It is great for platform bootstrapping and foundational services.
Can you combine app of apps and application set?
Yes, many platforms use app of apps for top-level platform composition and application sets for dynamic fleet-style generation underneath it. The pattern works well when ownership boundaries are clear.
How does application set track generated applications?
The application set controller sets owner references and metadata, so it knows which applications it generated, and can update or prune them when generator output changes.
What happens when an item disappears from an application set generator?
The generated application may be deleted depending on controller behavior and preservation settings. This is why generator changes must be treated with the same seriousness as normal production code changes.
What is preserve resources on deletion in application set workflows?
It is used when you want generated applications or their managed resources to remain even if the generator no longer emits them. This can prevent destructive cleanup during transitions or controller changes.
How can cluster secrets be used with the cluster generator?
Registered cluster secrets can carry labels and annotations that the generator uses for selection and templating. This enables patterns like only generating apps for production clusters or clusters in a given region.
What is a good pattern for onboarding a new cluster into ArgoCD?
Register the cluster with least privilege credentials, label it with environment metadata, verify project restrictions, and then let application sets or root apps generate the expected workloads. This keeps onboarding repeatable and low drama.
How do you manage hundreds of applications in ArgoCD?
Use projects for boundaries, application sets for generation, consistent naming conventions, dashboards for health, and Git repo structures that make ownership obvious. Large environments need both technical controls and humane organization.
What is a common multi-cluster pattern with ArgoCD?
A central ArgoCD instance manages many clusters, while projects and application sets enforce who can deploy what and where. Some organizations prefer one ArgoCD per environment or region for blast radius control.
When might you choose one ArgoCD instance per environment?
Separate instances can reduce blast radius, simplify compliance boundaries, and avoid one control plane becoming a single point of organizational pain. The trade-off is more operational overhead.
What is ArgoCD notifications used for in practice?
It is used to notify teams about sync success, sync failure, health degradation, drift, and other lifecycle events. It keeps GitOps from becoming a silent movie when deployments go wrong.
What are notification triggers in ArgoCD notifications?
Triggers define the events or conditions that cause notifications to fire, such as app sync succeeded or health degraded. They connect application state transitions to templates and destinations.
What are notification templates in ArgoCD notifications?
Templates define the message body, formatting, and variables for notifications. They let teams tailor alerts for Slack, email, webhooks, and other services.
What are subscriptions in ArgoCD notifications?
Subscriptions map recipients or channels to triggers, usually via annotations or configuration. This makes it possible for each application or team to receive the alerts that matter to them.
How does ArgoCD integrate with Slack?
ArgoCD notifications can send formatted messages to Slack channels using configured webhooks or app integrations. Teams often use this for sync failures, degraded health, and production change visibility.
What is ArgoCD Image Updater?
ArgoCD Image Updater is a companion tool that detects new container images and updates application source definitions accordingly. It helps automate image tag promotion while keeping GitOps workflows intact.
How does ArgoCD Image Updater keep GitOps intact?
Instead of deploying directly to the cluster, it updates Git or application parameters so ArgoCD performs the actual reconciliation. The desired state still changes through a version source of truth.
What are common write-back strategies for ArgoCD Image Updater?
It can write updates back to Git or update application parameters depending on the chosen workflow. Git writeback is usually preferred for stronger auditability and reviewability.
How does ArgoCD work with Argo rollouts?
ArgoCD manages the rollout custom resources from Git, while Argo rollouts handles the progressive delivery logic in the cluster. Git defines the strategy and thresholds. The rollout controller executes them.
What is a good GitOps pattern for database migrations with ArgoCD?
Use explicit pre-sync hooks or dedicated migration jobs with careful ordering and observability. Database changes are one of the few places where just sync it deserves a suspicious eyebrow.
What are common causes of out-of-sync status with no obvious source change?
Controllers, webhooks, defaulting logic, or status-like fields incorrectly included in manifests can all create noisy diffs. Ignore differences and proper manifest hygiene usually solve this.
Why might a resource be healthy but the app be out of sync?
Health measures runtime condition, not whether the live spec exactly matches Git. A deployment can be happily running with replicas available while still differing from the desired configuration.
Why might an app be synced but degraded?
ArgoCD may have applied the desired state successfully, but the resources themselves are unhealthy, crashing, or not progressing. Sync answers, was it applied, not is it working.
What does missing mean in ArgoCD resource status?
Missing means a desired resource from Git is not present in the live cluster. This can happen before first sync, after manual deletion, or when apply failed.
What does unknown health mean in ArgoCD?
Unknown means ArgoCD does not know how to evaluate health for that resource kind, or the health script provided no clear state. Custom resource kinds often need custom health checks.
What does degraded health usually indicate in ArgoCD?
Degraded generally means ArgoCD believes the resource is not meeting its expected operational condition, such as a deployment with unavailable replicas or a failed job hook.
What is a common cause of manifest generation errors in ArgoCD?
Broken Helm templates, missing value files, invalid customized patches, plugin failures, or repository access issues commonly cause manifest generation errors. Repo server logs are usually the first place to investigate.
Where should you look first when repo rendering fails?
Start with repo server logs because that component performs source fetches and manifest rendering. They usually show the exact Helm, customize, plugin, or auth error behind the failure.
What causes repository authentication failures in ArgoCD?
Expired tokens, wrong SSH keys, missing known hosts, incorrect CI trust, bad repository URL, or permission changes on the source provider are the usual suspects.
What causes immutable field sync failures?
Some Kubernetes fields cannot be changed in place once a resource exists. When Git changes those fields, ArgoCD may need replacement or a manual migration strategy instead of a normal apply.
How do you handle immutable field changes safely with ArgoCD?
Plan the change explicitly, often by creating a new resource, using controlled recreation, or separating migration steps into multiple commits. Blind force replace in production is bold in all the wrong ways.
What is a common CR derace condition in ArgoCD?
ArgoCD may try to validate or apply a custom resource before its CRD exists in the cluster. Sync waves and skip dry run on missing resource are common fixes.
Why do some hooks get stuck in ArgoCD?
Hook jobs may hang, fail, wait on unavailable dependencies, or never satisfy deletion conditions. Observing the job, its pods, and related events usually reveals the root cause.
What is a common cause of perpetual progressing status?
A deployment or stateful set may not meet readiness conditions, a hook may still be running, or a custom health check may be too strict. Progressing usually means ArgoCD is waiting for success that never arrives.
How do you troubleshoot an application stuck in progressing?
Check the resource tree, controller logs, Kubernetes events, pod readiness, and custom health logic. The answer is usually in the workload behavior rather than the application object itself.
What is a common cause of resource ownership conflicts in ArgoCD?
Two applications may render the same resource name and namespace or share cluster-scoped resources unintentionally. Clear app boundaries and project policies help prevent this.
How do you troubleshoot a diff caused by mutating admission webhooks?
Identify which fields are being injected or modified after apply, then ignore those fields if they are expected. Admission-generated changes are a classic source of noisy drift.
Why are HPI-managed replica counts often ignored in ArgoCD diffs?
The HPI controller legitimately changes the replicas field at runtime. If Git pins replicas while HPI changes it, ArgoCD and HPI can fight unless that field is intentionally excluded from diffing.
How should you handle controller-generated secrets or config maps with ArgoCD?
Avoid treating generated artifacts as Git-managed desired state unless they truly belong there. Exclude or ignore them when appropriate so ArgoCD does not chase ephemeral runtime outputs.
Can ArgoCD manage jobs?
Yes, but jobs need special care because they are often one-shot resources whose life cycle differs from long-running workloads. Hooks or explicit recreation strategies are common patterns.
Why can pruning be dangerous?
Pruning deletes resources no longer present in Git, which is powerful but unforgiving if a bad commit removes the wrong thing. Many teams require review controls before enabling auto-prune broadly.
When should you disable auto-prune?
Disable it when deletions are high risk, when environments are still being stabilized, or when manual approval is required for destructive changes. Production data systems often deserve this extra caution.
When is self-heal most valuable?
Self-heal is especially valuable in environments where manual cube control changes happen frequently or where drift has security implications. It reinforces Git as the only accepted source of desired state.
When might you avoid self-heal temporarily?
You may disable it during incident response, maintenance, or exploratory debugging when short-lived manual changes are necessary. The important part is to re-enable it once the situation is understood.
What metrics are important to monitor for ArgoCD itself?
Key metrics include reconciliation counts and duration, app sync status totals, queue depth, repo server request latency, cache behavior, and error rates. These show whether ArgoCD is healthy as a control plane.
What logs are most useful when troubleshooting ArgoCD?
The application controller, repo server, ArgoCD server, and notifications controller logs are the usual starting points. Which one matters depends on whether the problem is diffing, rendering, auth, or user interaction.
How does repo server caching affect performance?
Caching reduces repeated fetch and render work, which improves responsiveness and scale. The trade-off is that you sometimes need a hard refresh when the cache is not reflecting new source state fast enough.
Why can large monorepos be challenging for ArgoCD?
Large repos increase fetch size, render cost, and the chance of accidental coupling between unrelated apps. Clear path conventions and targeted application definitions help keep performance manageable.
How do you scale repo server in large ArgoCD deployments?
Scale repo server replicas, tune caching, minimize expensive plugins, and reduce redundant rendering work through sensible repo structure. Heavy manifest generation belongs on a diet.
How do you scale the application controller in large environments?
Tune reconciliation behavior, controller resources, and sharding strategies if supported by your design. Large fleets benefit from distributing load rather than relying on one overworked controller instance.
What does high availability mean for ArgoCD?
HI means running critical components with multiple replicas, ensuring backing dependencies are resilient, and avoiding single points of failure in routing and persistence. You want the control plane to survive node and pod failures gracefully.
Which ArgoCD components are usually scaled horizontally?
ArgoCD server and repo server are commonly scaled horizontally, and other controllers may also be replicated depending on the component and architecture. HI guidance depends on the specific version and deployment mode.
Why does Redis availability matter in ArgoCD?
Because Redis supports caching and coordination functions, degraded Redis can impact responsiveness and some controller workflows. In large or critical environments, Redis should not be treated as a toy dependency.
What is a good disaster recovery strategy for ArgoCD?
Keep all configuration declarative in Git, backup cluster registration and secrets, test reinstall procedures, and verify that a fresh ArgoCD can reconstruct the desired state quickly. Recovery plans should be exercised, not just admired in documentation.
What are good naming conventions for ArgoCD applications?
Names should make app purpose, environment, and sometimes cluster obvious at a glance. Consistency is more important than artistry here, because operators need to scan large application lists quickly.
What is a good repository layout for ArgoCD managed environments?
Use clear separation between reusable bases and environment-specific overlays, and make ownership obvious by path. The best layout is one reviewers can understand without a treasure map.
Why should GitOps changes use pull requests and reviews?
Reviews provide change control, peer validation, and an auditable approval trail before ArgoCD acts on the new desired state. This is one of the biggest governance advantages of GitOps.
Why is branch protection important in GitOps repositories?
Branch protection prevents unreviewed or direct pushes from changing production intent. Since Git drives deployment, protecting Git is effectively protecting production.
What is a good emergency hotfix workflow with ArgoCD?
Make the change in Git through an expedited but still traceable process, then let ArgoCD reconcile it. Manual cluster edits should be the temporary exception, not the official plan.
How do you reconcile emergency manual changes back into Git?
As soon as the incident is stabilized, capture the manual change in Git and let ArgoCD converge back to declared state. Leaving the fix only in cluster creates hidden drift and future confusion.
What is a common ArgoCD anti-pattern?
A common anti-pattern is using ArgoCD while still relying on frequent manual kube control edits in production. That turns GitOps into Gitish ops, which is considerably less fun than it sounds.
What is another common ArgoCD anti-pattern?
Letting multiple applications own overlapping resources is a recipe for conflict, confusion, and unpredictable syncs. Clear ownership boundaries are essential.
When should you split a large ArgoCD application into smaller ones?
Split applications when ownership differs, failure domains differ, sync timing differs, or troubleshooting one big tree becomes painful. Smaller, coherent apps are usually easier to reason about.
When might a single larger ArgoCD application be reasonable?
A larger application can make sense when a tightly coupled stack must always move together and shares the same owners, repo, lifecycle, and destination. The key is cohesion, not raw object count.
How does ArgoCD compare with Flux at a high level?
ArgoCD emphasizes an integrated UI-driven experience with strong application-centric workflows, while Flux leans toward modular controllers and Kubernetes-native resource composition. Both implement Git ops well, but their operator ergonomics differ.
When is ArgoCD often preferred over Flux?
ArgoCD is often preferred when teams want a rich UI, strong visual diffing, easy app management, and centralized multi-cluster operations. It is especially attractive for platform teams serving many application owners.
When might Flux be preferred over ArgoCD?
Flux may be preferred when teams want a controller toolkit model, tighter Helm-native workflows, or integrated image automation patterns without relying on a central UI-centric platform.
How do you migrate from manual Helm usage to ArgoCD?
First, define the chart source and values declaratively in Git, then let ArgoCD render and manage the resulting manifests. The big mindset shift is that Helm becomes a render engine, not the deployment authority.
How do you migrate from push-based CI/CD to ArgoCD?
Move deployment intent into Git. Adjust CI to build artifacts and update the repo instead of applying to the cluster. Then let ArgoCD take over reconciliation. This cleanly separates build from deploy.
What are good production best practices for ArgoCD?
Use projects and RBAC boundaries, secure repository and cluster credentials, protect Git branches, enable observability, tune diff noise carefully, and keep as much configuration declarative as possible. The goal is a calm control plane, not a heroic one.
What is the simplest explanation of ArgoCD for an interview?
ArgoCD is a Kubernetes Git ops controller that continuously compares what should exist according to Git with what actually exists in the cluster, then helps bring them back into alignment. It turns Git commits into auditable deployment intent.